Hello everyone, welcome to Cashcroft TV. My name is Kalen Ashcroft. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Ages of Empires, where we will be going through all the major world empires throughout history. Today we will be covering the 26th Dynasty of Egypt and the Kosala Kingdom. So this is actually, we did the Old Kingdom of Egypt, the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, the New Kingdom of Egypt, as well as covered some of the intermediate periods too. For example, the 25th Dynasty of Egypt, which was a foreign ruler over the Egyptian region. This is the 26th Dynasty of Egypt. It's actually not considered part of this third intermediate period, but nonetheless, it's a very key empire that will sort of start to round out our Egyptian history. However, we'll likely still have to touch on it more, maybe in an independent episode, or maybe through its connections with other empires. As for the Kosala Kingdom, we cover the Indus Valley civilization, which took place in modern-day India. This is one of the first kingdoms of India, though, however, we will specifically address, and there will be more to come. And nonetheless, one of my most influential books in my life is Plutarch's Parallel Lives. So for each of these empires, I will also endeavor to provide a biography of a leader from each respective empire, and at the very end of the video we will have a comparison between these two leaders to sort of see how they differ and see what takeaways we can apply to our own lives, or at least my own lives, and through effect hopefully even learn a bit more about their respective empires. So without further ado, we will begin with the first empire, and then we will continue the biography of a leader of the first empire, then we'll do the second empire, and then we'll do a biography of the second leader from the second empire, and then we'll have the comparison. So nonetheless, so the 26th Dynasty of Egypt. So as mentioned, we've covered the Old Kingdom of Egypt, the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, the New Kingdom of Egypt, as well as the 25th Dynasty of Egypt. So this is the 26th Dynasty of Egypt, however, not connected in terms of, it's not the same family as the 25th Dynasty of Egypt. So the 26th Dynasty of Egypt, also known as the Sa'ite Dynasty, because they came from Sais, which was their capital, which differed from many of the other Egyptian empires previously, marked a significant period in the history of ancient Egypt. It spanned from approximately 664 BCE to 525 BCE, and is often considered the last native dynasty before Egypt fell under Persian rule. We will be covering the Persian Empire very soon, a very significant empire that has affected many of our empires already so far. Therefore, we will seek, in the style of the rise and the fall, as we've been doing with all the empires, we'll seek to provide a detailed account of the rise and fall of this important 26th Dynasty of Egypt. So starting with the rise of the 26th Dynasty, circa 664 BCE to 610 BCE, starting with Libyan invasions. Prior to the 26th Dynasty, Egypt had suffered from a series of invasions from political instability. Around 664, the Libyans, who are to the west of Egypt, led by King Psamtik I, successfully overthrew the Assyrian-backed rulers and established the 26th Dynasty. So as we previously covered, the Assyrians, a very important empire, and we've covered different periods of the Assyrian Empire too, came to rule over Egypt. And it was the 26th Dynasty under the rule of Libyan King Psamtik I who expelled the Assyrians. As for the consolidation of power, Psamtik I worked to stabilize the region by consolidating power and re-establishing central authority. He sought to unify Egypt and re-establish its traditional customs. So as we've observed throughout all the previous empires of ancient Egypt, is that loss of central authority was one of the leading causes of their decline. But it must be mentioned that these Egyptian empires, all of them so far, have been, in the first place, some of the most centralized empires. Namely, for example, the pharaoh has a God-given right. It's not even considered a God-given right. The pharaoh, throughout almost the entire history or different periods of the Egyptian empires, we can say plural because there are different periods. At some periods, Egypt wasn't an empire, but nonetheless, these pharaohs often, and during these periods, were seen as gods themselves. So not just a divine right important distinction. As for expansion and diplomacy, Psamtik I embarked on a series of diplomatic missions and military campaigns to secure Egypt's borders and establish alliances with neighboring regions. Moving to the zenith of the dynasty, from 610 BCE to 525 BCE. With Necho II, 610 BCE to 595 BCE. Psamtik I was succeeded by his son, Necho II, and Necho II was an ambitious ruler who sought to extend Egyptian influence beyond its borders. He embarked on an ambitious project to build a canal linking the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea, so a huge infrastructural project known as the Necho Canal or Herodotus Canal, which aimed to facilitate trade and communication. So it's biographed in Herodotus's The Histories, which is one of the greatest history books ever written, and not to mention one of, if not the first. Important analogous, I'm currently reading Gulag Archipelago, the part 2, and in it biographs how they created canals, and it was Stalin was ordering these canals to be built in the Soviet Union. But nonetheless, he makes the joke that they built on an Egyptian scale, and even, however, it was thousands of years later. So nonetheless, the point was the Egyptians, when they were building their pyramids and their canals, were using the modern technologies at their time. But Solzhenitsyn in Gulag Archipelago points out that yes, they were building Egyptian level constructions, but they weren't using the latest technology. So at least it was, he thought, to be ridiculous. But not to be said of the Egyptians, because the Egyptians at the time were using the best technology. As for the conquest of Levant, Necho II attempted to expand Egyptian territory into the Levant, which brought them into conflict with the rising Babylonian Empire. In 609 BCE, the Egyptians suffered significant defeat at the Battle of Megiddo against the Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar II. So we've also covered the Nebuchadnezzars and the second included in the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Under Psamtik II, from 595 BCE to 589 BCE, following Necho II's death, his son Psamtik II took the throne. He focused on rebuilding and consolidating Egypt's power after the defeat at Megiddo. And then to the leader Apries, from 589 to BCE to 570 BCE. Apries, also known as Hofra, came to power after the death of Psamtik II. He continued to maintain diplomatic relations with other nations and expanded Egypt's influence in the Mediterranean. So something that kind of becomes a larger focus for this dynasty as opposed to the previous empires and dynasties is a focus on the Mediterranean, building a canal into the Mediterranean and seeking to have alliances and domination in the Mediterranean. Perhaps a hypothesis I put forward is that Sais itself is closer to the Mediterranean than, for example, Memphis, but maybe there's other purposes as well. Moving to the decline and fall, however, from 570 BCE to 525 BCE. So it's quite a short-lived empire, just considering its greatness, just over 100 years, or 129, I believe, 129 years, so quite short. So imagine an empire living that, coming to greatness that quick. But so the causes, internal struggles. Apries' rule was marked by discontent among the military and increasingly powerful and dissatisfied aristocracy. His attempts to exert control led to internal conflicts. So once again, loss of this centralization. Where Egypt was most strong was really when the pharaoh had absolute authority. But as we can see here, not only did they have some aristocracy competing with competing interests, but also discontent among the military. So the military leaders also had power too, which is one of the causes of the many causes of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire as seen in Gibbon. As for the rebellion of Amasis II, in 570 BCE, Amasis II, a general of Apries' army, led a rebellion against him, so a military coup even. Apries was defeated and imprisoned, while Amasis II became the new pharaoh. So something that's clear in Gibbon's decline and fall of the Roman Empire is that after the descendants or the chosen descendants, after the first murder of the empire, they really lost the first murder of an emperor. They really lost that appeal or the godlike character of the emperor. After that, it was like they sold it to them. Often they even once had a bid to see who should be emperor. So after this, it was very much weakened. But not to mention the external threat, the Persian conquest. In the mid-6th century BCE, the Persian Empire, led by Cyrus the Great, who has, as we saw, just defeated in the previous episode, the Neo-Babylonian Empire, as well as the Lydian Empire. Now, too, we see he also defeated the 26th Dynasty of Egypt. So, led by Cyrus the Great, began its conquest in the Near East. In 525 BCE, Cambyses II, the son of Cyrus, led a successful invasion of Egypt, marking the end of the 26th dynasty. So, at least they maybe lived past Cyrus the Great, but nonetheless were defeated by the Persian army, or the Achaemenid Empire, whom we will cover soon, or which we will cover soon. It was not a person. As for the legacy, the 26th dynasty left a lasting impact on Egyptian history. It was a period of cultural revival and expansion, but also one of internal strife and external pressure. Its legacy is a testament to the resilience and adaptability of ancient Egyptian civilization in the face of changing geopolitical landscapes. So it's amazing that Egypt just keeps coming back as a great empire. And some regions only ever had one empire, some regions only had a couple, but Egypt throughout all these histories just kept rising and falling, from the old kingdom of Egypt to the middle kingdom of Egypt to the new kingdom of Egypt to the 25th dynasty of Egypt to the 26th dynasty of Egypt. So nonetheless, a very fascinating history. So now to move into depth on a specific leader, and it will be Psamtik I, also known as Psamtikos I, and he was, as we see, the founder of the 26th dynasty of Egypt. So starting with his birth and early life, Psamtik I was born around 664 BCE in Sais, a city located in the Nile Delta in ancient Egypt. So it coincided, supposedly, his birth with the date of the empire, but the date of his birth is contested. So it was probably, in my opinion, before that, but nonetheless. He hailed from noble lineage, with his father being Necho I, so he names his son Necho II after his father, but his father did not come to create the dynasty. A local ruler in the Nile Delta. So his father was a local ruler, but not necessarily pharaoh as he himself came to be. So people, there's a debate, to what extent, if somebody comes from a wealthy family and they're still wealthy, it discounts them. Well, he came from a powerful family, but he did not come from the pharaoh's family, so he still climbed significantly. He did not come from a peasant family. That would have been a more significant climb, but that doesn't necessarily mean a climb that is bigger in distance. For example, a peasant to a pharaoh doesn't necessarily mean it's more difficult. As for his ascension to the throne, Psamtik I's rise to power occurred during a tumultuous period in Egyptian history. Around 664 BCE, Egypt was under control of the Assyrian Empire, when local rulers, including Psamtik I's father, were appointed vassals. So even his father was under Assyrian rule. With the support of powerful allies, however, Psamtik I led a rebellion against the Assyrians and Assyrian-backed rulers as well, their vassals as well, ultimately achieving independence and becoming a ruler of a unified Egypt. So it's important to note that he did use allies in his rebellion, and nonetheless some of the Egyptians were still siding with the Assyrians, so a tough battle to win, but nonetheless he came out as the leader of the cause and of a unified Egypt as well. As for his reign, so perhaps I think his date would have been earlier, because this other source I found says his reign was from 664 BCE to 610 BCE, so I think his likely start was born before that. So Psamtik I's early years were dedicated to consolidating power and establishing a strong central authority, key in at least throughout the history of ancient Egypt. One of his key accomplishments was the reunification of Upper and Lower Egypt. This achievement symbolized a return of the traditional order of the pharaonic rule. So to qualify as an Egyptian empire, it necessarily required the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. Despite in this case they came from Upper Egypt, from Sais as their capital, but nonetheless it sometimes worked vice versa. Psamtik I was known for his diplomatic skills. He maintained alliances with neighboring states and sought to secure Egypt's borders against potential threats. He embarked on a series of military campaigns to reclaim territories that had been lost during the period of political fragmentation in Egypt. So he likely had this vision of a restored Egypt, and he endeavored to do that and achieved much of it during his own lifetime, and his successors continued that. As for his cultural policies and influence, Psamtik I is recognized for his efforts to foster a cultural renaissance in Egypt. He encouraged the blending of traditional Egyptian customs with those of foreign occupiers, leading to a distinctive cultural amalgamation. He supported the restoration and renovation of temples and monuments, revitalizing the country's religious infrastructure. So one of the dynasties, I believe 25th is, or Hyksos empire was a key one to note because they came from the east and they brought their customs with them, and supposedly, so at that time I would say Egypt started to become a multicultural region. It has also been hypothesized that under that rule, the Hyksos rule, it was that the Egyptians or certain tribes of Egypt were under Egyptian enslavement, but that would be before this, but I did not mention in that episode, but I'd like to point that out now. He supported the restoration and renovation of temples and monuments, revitalizing the country's religious infrastructure. So important to note that yes, he was very significant in restorations and renovations of temples, but it's important to note that the greatest architectural achievements, the Great Pyramids of Giza, were created in the new Kingdom of Egypt, almost 1,500 years before. So very, very interesting that they were not they did not create pyramids later. Maybe they did not have the technology. Perhaps we don't even have the technology today to do it efficiently, or perhaps there was some lost idea, which Graham Hancock might allude to, as someone I very much admire, or maybe they just did not find it as important. Maybe building great pyramids when there's a potential threats is maybe not the most practical thing to do, but nonetheless, maybe great in terms of certain arts and maybe great in creating a multicultural society, but nowhere can it compare to the old Kingdom of Egypt in terms of architectural achievements, and perhaps no place in the world could, or no empire throughout all history could. As for his death and legacy, Psamtik I ruled for approximately 54 years, making him one of the longest reigning pharaohs in Egyptian history. His reign is viewed as a turning point in Egyptian history, marking a resurgence of Egyptian power and identity after a period of foreign influence and occupation. Psamtik's the first policies and achievements laid the foundation for subsequent successes of the 26th Dynasty, including, for example, under Necho II, his son, or under Psamtik II, his grandson, leaving an enduring legacy on the Egyptian history and culture. Thus, Psamtik I's reign was characterized by his adeptness in diplomacy, his military acumen, and his dedication to the cultural and political renewal of Egypt. If I might add also his great daring, I think. Maybe because he was the one to do it. Maybe if no one else had his courage, it might have never happened, not to mention that he was successful in doing it, proving his abilities. His legacy as the founder of the 26th Dynasty and his role in reuniting and revitalizing Egypt solidify his status as perhaps the most significant rulers in all of ancient Egyptian history, but certainly in the 26th Dynasty of Egypt. So that is Psamtik I and the 26th Dynasty of Egypt. We will now discuss the content of the slide before continuing to our next empire and leader. So in terms of information title, we have Psamtik I and the 26th Dynasty of Egypt, also known as the Side period. So not necessarily an intermediate period, not necessarily a old, middle, or certainly not the old, middle, or new kingdoms of Egypt, but it's the Saite period, quite distinct because they ruled out of Sais, their capital city. It's also considered the last dynasty to rule Egypt before a Persian conquest. And the last one should be deleted. The last policy of monarchs native to Mesopotamia. That's not true. They actually came from Libya. So my apologies if that created any confusion. In terms of further information, significant leader Psamtik I, Empire, 26th Dynasty of Egypt, period circa 664 to 525 BCE, modern location, the Nile Delta, Egypt, million square kilometers, 0.65, so perhaps larger than, for example, the 25th dynasty of Egypt, but I believe there was one that was slightly larger. I think it was maybe the New Kingdom of Egypt was its largest extant. Million square miles, 0.25% of the world, 0.48%. Capital city, Sais, which differed from the capital often, for example, under other Egyptian empires, such as Memphis. Government, monarchy, common language, Egyptian. Religion, ancient Egyptian. Population, several millions. So that could range from more than 2, because not a couple, but 3 to 7, I would say. In terms of images, in the top left, we have an image of Psamtik I, or a sculpture of Psamtik I. To the right, we have a fascinating battle scene, which is the Battle of Karchemish against Babylonians, with remnants of the Assyrians as their aides, and they ultimately, and this battle supposedly took place in 605 BCE, but perhaps it was even before. But nonetheless, it shows multiple factors such as alliances with the Assyrians fighting against the Babylonians, but a key feature of their battle abilities. To the right, we have an image of Psamtik, and the first as he enters Ashdod after the fall of Ashdod in 635 BCE, so another successful victory. I think so. But what happened, going back to the Battle of Karchemish against the Babylonians with remnants of the Assyrian army, their aides, they actually lost the battle in 605 BCE. Below that, we have a timeline of the rulers. So Psamtik I, so he has that long green bar showing as manifesting him being the longest ruler in Egyptian history. Next came Necho II from 610 to 595 BCE, to the grandson of Psamtik I, Psamtik II, from 595 to 589 BCE. Next to Wahibre, from 589 to 570 BCE, once again a long period, and then Amasis II, who perhaps started having the real contests against the Persians, and Psamtik III, the last, from 526 to 525 BCE, and Amasis II was 570 to 526 BCE. And in the top right, we have a map of ancient Egypt. We can see Sais is closer to the Mediterranean, sort of in the northwest, and we can see Memphis far below to the south. We can see the pyramids are also far to the south. So, and as we can see, they tried to connect the Red Sea, or even did, through a canal between the Red Sea and the Mediterranean, so showing a sort of different importance. Then maybe this canal could have been, could be considered a greater achievement than the pyramids, but I don't think anyone would, anyone that I've heard has referred to it as such. So that is Psamtik of the 26th Dynasty of Egypt, and we'll discuss the leader more after covering the Kosala Kingdom and Mahakosala. So the Kosala Empire, located in ancient Egypt, so we previously covered the Indus Valley Civilization, and we will be covering more Indian empires as well. And this was a prominent kingdom that held sway over parts of present-day northern India. Therefore, we'll endeavor to provide a detailed account of the rise and fall of this important empire and sort of start tracing our picture of the ancient Indian history. As for the rise of the Kosala Empire, starting with its early origins, the Kosala Kingdom was one of the 16 Mahajanapadas, or great kingdoms, of ancient India. Its early history is shrouded in myth and legend, with references in ancient texts like the Rig Veda. As for the kingdom of Ayodhya, which is their capital, Kosala's most famous city was Ayodhya, which was believed to be its capital. It gained prominence in Hindu mythology as the birthplace of Lord Rama, a central figure in the epic Ramayana. So many famous people came from Kosala. So Kosala, maybe, as we might see as we cover some more Indian empires, might not be the most powerful of all time of the ancient Egyptian empires, but it claims some of the most important figures, such as Rama, as we shall see here, Mahavira, whom I have covered in a previous series, History of Leaders of Thought, as well as Buddha, who I have also covered. As for the rivalry with Magda, we will be covering the Magda Empire soon. The Magda-Kosala rivalry in starting with its rivalry with Bimbisara and Magadha. In the 6th century BCE, the Kosala Empire faced competition from the rising power of the Magadha kingdom, led by King Bimbisara. So Bimbisara was the king of Magadha. If you can see the map here, Kosala, the Magadha Empire was to the southeast of the Kosala Empire, and it will eventually, as we shall cover, the Magadha Empire will eventually defeat Kosala and eventually claims some of the most territory. But for the time, Kosala was one of the most powerful. And Bimbisara, so in the 6th century, was the king. And the two states vied for control of the fertile Gangetic plains. So they're fighting over resources. And further on the rivalry with Magadha, hopefully you can see the map, it's that blue one to the right of Kosala. The Magadha-Kosala rivalry intensified under the reign of King Prasenajit of Kosala and King Ajatashatru of Magadha. The two kingdoms engaged in military conflict for territorial dominance. By the 6th century BCE, Kosala consolidated into one of the four great powers of the ancient northern India, including Magadha, their long-lasting rival, Vatsa, and Avanti. As for Buddha's enlightenment during this period, Gautama Buddha, the founder of Buddhism, attained enlightenment in the region of Kosala. It's a very important place, supposedly under a tree. This event had a profound impact on the spread of Buddhism, and the Kosala Empire became a significant center of Buddhist teachings, even till today. So very important. Maybe it wasn't the great in terms of military endeavors, but nonetheless, that's very contrary to the philosophy of Buddha to begin with. So maybe it's at least the source of one of the most peaceful religions out there. As for the zenith of the empire, kingdom expansion during the 5th and 4th centuries BCE, the Kosala Empire reached its zenith under the rule of King Mahakosala, who we will cover. The empire extended its influence over a vast region encompassing parts of modern-day Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. Uttar means northern. As for cultural flourishing, the Kosala Empire was the center of cultural and intellectual activities during the period. That's where Mahavira came from, and Buddha as well. It was known for its patronage of the arts, philosophy, and literature. So without maybe its arts, maybe the stories of Mahavira and Buddha never would have been passed on. So perhaps that's not true, but that's important, I think I might add. But moving to its decline and fall, with the conflict with Magadha, who, as alluded to, their long-lasting rival. The rivalry with Magadha continued, and it ultimately took control of Kosala's strength. The Magadhan king, Ajatashatru, was particularly aggressive and successful in expanding Magadha's territory. As for the invasion by Magadha in the 5th century BCE, Magadha forces led by Ajatashatru launched a successful invasion of Kosala. They captured the capital city of Suravasti, marking a significant blow to the Kosala Empire. As for division and weakening, after the invasion, Kosala was divided into smaller provinces. This division weakened the once mighty empire, leaving it vulnerable to further external pressures, particularly from the Magadha Empire. But as for the legacy, the Kosala Empire left a lasting, as for later history first. Over the centuries, remnants of the Kosala Empire gradually lost their prominence. The region saw the rise and fall of various dynasties, including the Mauryas and the Guptas. So, nonetheless, they still had some important rulers, but nonetheless, Magadha became the sort of leading of the four great powers in this region. And we will cover Magadha too in this, hopefully. If you endeavor to watch both episodes, hopefully they can come together in a cohesive picture. But I'll try to explain this on the map too as we discuss the slide. Thus, the Kosala Empire left a lasting impact on Indian history and culture. It played a vital role in the development and spread of Buddhism, and its capital, Ayodhya, remained a revered city in Hindu tradition. The legacy of the Kosala Empire is still felt in modern India, and its cultural and religious significance continues to influence the region. So perhaps, yes, it did conquer many regions, and it did come to be one of the 4 great powers in that region, but its significance might even overshadow those of Magadha, which ultimately conquered them, because they can claim Buddha and Mahavira, or Kosala can, and these are perhaps, well, some of the most revered or most famous names throughout all of history, and I don't think they'll ever go away. So, and they came from this empire. So maybe in terms of the legacy of empires, maybe it's more important to create a tradition or great patronage of the arts, or sort of philosophy might even be more long-lasting than a strong military. As for a specific ruler, we'll have King Mahakosala, who led over the most powerful period of Kosala. The most important ruler of the Kosala Empire in ancient India was King Mahakosala. He reigned during the zenith of the empire's power in the 5th and 4th centuries BCE. While detailed historical records from this period are limited, the influence and achievements of King Mahakosala are celebrated in both historical accounts and religious texts. Thus, we will seek to provide a factual biography of this significant figure. For his reign, 5th to the 4th centuries BCE, so there's part of me on the slide that says that it ends in circa 500 BCE, but 500 BCE includes, or the 5th century includes all the 400, but maybe I should have put 700 to 400 BCE. The dates are often disputed, but nonetheless, these are the dates that I have been able to accumulate, and sometimes getting different sources, I get different numbers, so bear with me. But as for the early life of Mahakosala, King Mahakosala was born into the royal lineage of the Kosala Empire, so they were already powerful at that time. He happened to rule over the pinnacle, inheriting a legacy of traditional, territorial, and cultural richness. He likely received extensive education and training in governance, warfare, and cultural and religious traditions of the time. As for his rise to power, Mahakosala ascended to the throne at a pivotal time in Kosala's history. He inherited a kingdom that was already influential, but went on to expand its territory and influence even further. Some of his achievements, which I'll cover, such as the expansion of the empire. King Mahakosala is renowned for expanding the Kosala Empire to its greatest territorial extent. He led successful military campaigns, annexing neighboring regions and solidifying his dominion over vast swaths of northern India. So as we mentioned, there used to be 16 great realms, and then sort of through much of his influence and power, it consolidated into 4 great powers of ancient India. As for his cultural patronage, Mahakosala was a patron of the arts, literature, and culture. Under his rule, the Kosala Empire experienced a cultural renaissance, with flourishing artistic and intellectual activities, not to mention the influences of Mahavira and Buddha, religious as well. As for religious significance on that note, King Mahakosala played a crucial role in the development of the spread of Buddhism. The region under his rule, particularly Suravasti, modern-day Shravasti, was a significant center for Buddhist teachings and monastic activities. So he really did not only a patron of the arts, but a patron of religion, which is quite unique. Unlike the Egyptian model, they did not see that Mahakosala was the god. They didn't even see that Buddha was necessarily the god. They saw that the god, anyone could reach nirvana within their own lifetime and end the cycle of reincarnation. As I hope you endeavor to check out my episodes on Mahavira and Buddha. As for relations with other kingdoms, Mahakosala skillfully managed diplomatic relations with neighboring kingdoms. This helped maintain stability and security in the region, allowing the empire to flourish. So not only being great at battle, but also being powerful in diplomatic relations, particularly to hold off the Magadha Empire, whom we will cover in a following episode. As for his legacy, King Mahakosala's reign marked a pinnacle of prosperity and cultural achievement in the Kosala Empire. His efforts in expanding the empire's territory, promoting culture and religion, and maintaining diplomatic relations left an enduring mark in Indian history. Additionally, his patronage of Buddhism had a profound impact on the religion's development and dissemination, making Mahakosala a revered figure in Buddhist traditions. So some of the greatness he achieved in Buddhism should be reflected in part through his influence. and his contributions to the arts and culture continue to be celebrated in the annals of ancient Indian history. It's a very fascinating empire and fascinating leader. We'll now discuss the content of the slide. So in terms of the title, we have Mahakosala and the Kosala Kingdom. It was one of the 16 great realms. It went from one of the 16 great realms to one of the 4 great powers of ancient India. It's also the home of Rama, Mahavira, and Buddha, 3 very important figures in Indian history, all coming from this same region. So it speaks testament to the sort of the culture of thinking in this area. Information, we have significant leader Mahakosala, empire Kosala, period circa 700 to, pardon me, it should be circa maybe 400 BCE. Modern location, northern India. Million square kilometers, 0.5. Million square miles, 0.19. Percent of the world, 0.37. Capital, Ayodhya, and Shravasti of Uttar Kosala, which is the capital of Upper Kosala. So 2 capitals, but Ayodhya was likely the main capital, and perhaps Shravasti was maybe the religious capital, something that I hypothesize. Government, monarchy. Common language, Sanskrit, which I'm endeavoring to study. It's one of the oldest languages, and there's a lot of parallels by learning Sanskrit. It can help one learn other languages, such as Hindi, for example. Religion, historical Vedic, Jainism, and Buddhism. Population, it's almost impossible to find out a figure, but I would think it would be at least a few millions. They say the population was certainly less than India. India actually just passed China in having the largest population in the world, which is really a phenomenal thing to just try and kind of wrap my mind around, because there used to be a large gap even within my lifetime. But I would think there would be at least a few millions in this, maybe even tens of millions, but no source says hundreds of millions. But that could be possible too. So is for images in the top left, I could not find an image of Mahakosala, so this is actually the 4 residents of Buddha, which were likely all in Kosala, the Kosala region. So you can see his 4 residents there. I was just looking at it, I only see 2 residences, but maybe 2 of the residences are maybe up in the trees, but also I always go on this rant, why did I kind of say, it's not maybe a joke, but I wonder why was it that all these great figures reached enlightenment under a tree. Even Adam and Eve in the Genesis, or Buddha, or even Isaac Newton founded gravity under a tree. But then I make the joke, but it's certainly not true, but they just needed shade. But nonetheless, I think there's a deeper significance of trees and sort of certain wisdom in it. My last name is Ashcroft, and I think there's some connection, some significance perhaps of the ash tree, or just some sort of connection between enlightenment and trees generally. And this image shows certainly some beautiful trees. And pardon me for being facetious there if it came across that way. I appreciate the religion of Buddhism and Mahavira. And Genesis as well, I appreciate them all. As for to the right of that, we have a gold construction of Ayodhya, so that's what Ayodhya, the capital, might have looked like. Very beautiful, tall structures, I note, which is very beautiful. Below that, we have coins, both of them minted in Ayodhya. So they had a sort of centralized minting process, supposedly, which is very important to note. People could just mint coins were all over. They wouldn't have any authority, so very important. And also just having coinage. We saw the Lydians were some of the first to create coinage, but did they get this idea from the Lydians? It seems, as far as I can guess, they thought of it on their own. But maybe it came also from another region in ancient India. To the right of that, we have Presenadi, who succeeded Sanjaya Mahakosala. So this guy succeeded Mahakosala, and we have him on sort of procession, riding on elephants, and this obviously was painted or drawn much later, but nonetheless kind of an image of what things might have looked back then. And up in the top right, as I explained, so here's the map. So after they defeated Bimbisara, they sort of had this large swath of land, and at this time they were even larger than the Magadha Empire. There was the Vijika League, but nonetheless the Magadha Empire would eventually come to control all this land, and even all this land, as we shall see in the Magadha Empire. But during this time, they were the largest. So that is Mahakosala and the Kosala Kingdom. I hope you got excited about as we start delving deeper into the ancient Indian history as well. We've covered the Indus Valley civilization, but I hope as we cover more of these Indian empires, we'll sort of start to get a better picture, and I hope you endeavor to check those out as well. But first, we will do a quick comparison between Psamtik I and Mahakosala. So some kind of in the style of Plutarch's Lives, some of the leaders are arbitrarily grouped up together. They aren't necessarily ever alike. Sometimes they're very similar. So bear with me, and we'll just try to endeavor to see what we can learn from comparing them. So Psamtik I of the 26th Dynasty of Egypt and Mahakosala of the Kosala Empire were both significant rulers in their respective regions during ancient times. While they lived in different parts of the world and ruled at different periods, there are some interesting similarities and differences between them that we hope to reveal. So some of their similarities: expansion and stabilization. Both Psamtik I and Mahakosala were successful in expanding territorial boundaries of their respective empires. So they were both successful conquerors or expanders. Psamtik I reunified Egypt after a period of division, while Mahakosala expanded the Kosala Empire to its greatest territorial extent. So Psamtik I was the starter of a dynasty. Mahakosala was the one to cause its pinnacle. So very different in terms of where they placed in both of their respective empires' history. But it doesn't mean, I always say, a founder isn't necessarily better than one who creates a pinnacle, because maybe Psamtik I couldn't have created a pinnacle of an empire, whereas perhaps Mahakosala could not have founded an empire. Perhaps there are different skill sets. Perhaps much of the skill set is the same. It's impossible to compare. They're just two different periods just two different types of rulers. I would say founders and maybe continuers or pinnaclers. As for another similarity, their cultural patronage. Both rulers were patrons of culture and religion. Psamtik I fostered a cultural renaissance in Egypt, encouraging a blend of traditional customs with those of foreign occupiers, so sort of amalgamating different cultures. Mahakosala, on the other hand, supported flourishing of arts, literature, and played a pivotal role in the spread of Buddhism. So whereas Psamtik I sort of combined multiple cultures, Mahakosala maybe is different in that he combined with a religion. Rather than not fighting it, he sort of embraced it. But Psamtik I did embrace religions, but he was more sort of appreciating different cultures and sort of stayed a little bit more neutral, whereas Mahakosala, perhaps through necessity, embraced Buddhism and became a patron of it. As for the diplomatic skills, both rulers displayed diplomatic acumen in managing relations with neighboring states. Psamtik I maintained alliances with neighboring regions to secure Egypt's borders, while Mahakosala skillfully managed diplomatic relations with other kingdoms to maintain stability in the region. So Psamtik I, for example, used alliances to originally get his kingdom, even within other tribes in the region and also other states, whereas Mahakosala also made alliances with other states, sometimes through force, both of them, sometimes through force, sometimes through negotiations, but nonetheless, Psamtik I reinstated a dynasty. Mahakosala reached the greatest extent of land for the Kosala Empire, and Psamtik I for the 26th Dynasty of Egypt. As for their geographical context, Psamtik I ruled over Egypt, an ancient civilization in northeastern Africa, which had a rich history of distinctive cultural heritage. Mahakosala, on the other hand, ruled over the Kosala Empire in ancient India, another ancient civilization with its own unique cultural and religious traditions. So both very important empires to understand both the Egyptian and ancient Indian history, respectively. As for religious influence, while both rulers had an impact on religious practices, their influences differed. Psamtik I's reign did not lead to a significant shift in religious practices in Egypt, while Mahakosala played a crucial role in the development and spread of Buddhism, which had a profound and lasting impact on the religious landscape of ancient Egypt. So Mahakosala more I would say it was more like, I don't know if he forced Buddhism, I think he more embraced it, but nonetheless he observed a shift towards Buddhism, whereas Psamtik I sort of maintained this status quo ancient Egyptian religion as to have authority and sort of didn't want to step on anyone's feet or create something new. But nonetheless, Mahakosala did not create something new, but something new grew up in his state that he had to sort of make way for, whether it was through him pushing it to come to power or it naturally did so is impossible to tell. As for their historical conflicts, Psamtik I's reign occurred during a period of political and cultural revival in Egypt following a period of foreign influence and division, so it came at a very rough time in Egyptian history, whereas Mahakosala ruled at a time when ancient India was characterized by a complex network of kingdoms and religious movements, but his empire was already close to its pinnacle, and he culminated in its pinnacle. So, whereas Psamtik I came from the darkest period and sort of created a light out of darkness, whereas Mahakosala, the brightest light in the Kosala Empire. Thus, in terms of their legacy, Psamtik I's legacy is felt in the resurgence of Egyptian power and identity, as well as in the blend of cultural elements that characterized his reign. Mahakosala's legacy is marked by his significant contributions to Buddhism and the cultural flourishing of the Kosala Empire. So, both very key leaders in both of their respective empires. Therefore, Psamtik I and Mahakosala were both important rulers who left a lasting impact on their respective civilizations. Their reigns were marked by territorial expansion, certainly similar, cultural patronage, and diplomatic skills, but their geographical context, religious influence, historical setting, and ultimate legacies were distinct due to different regions and times in which they ruled, and also necessarily likely different characters. So, I hope you very much enjoyed learning about these two leaders and these two empires as much as I did. Once again, this is Psamtik I of the 26th Dynasty of Egypt and Mahakosala of the Kosala Empire. My name is Kalen Ashcroft. This is the Ages of Empire series. This is Cashcroft TV, and thank you very much for your support. And I hope you continue to do so.